Hello, welcome back to Talking Giants, brought to you by SeatGeek. Today is December 9th, 2025, and we had Dan Duggan of The Athletic on. Good little 53-minute interview, and you're going to hear like my tone of voice right now in this. I'm probably a little bit intentionally, a little bit more peppy right now because, oh my God, I recorded this interview at 8:30 a.m. Central Time, as it was 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because I was out in Kansas City, Missouri this weekend. I saw Texans-Chiefs. DraftKings sent us out to Sunday Night Football in Arrowhead, and it was an awesome time. Had a great time. Walked like 5 miles throughout the day. Filmed a lot of stuff for DraftKings, a lot of man-on-the-street stuff. Even interviewed like Jamal Charles. So after that long day on Sunday, I kind of woke up on Monday, and I'm like, all right, we're going to interview Duggan, and I really appreciate Dan Duggan kind of hopping on. Going to interview Duggan, and I'm like, oh my God, I sound horrible. And I like knew that I sounded horrible too. And I'm like trying to like put two words together. And sometimes that didn't happen. So that is why. And I was also interviewing him from a hotel room. And that is why. So thank you to DraftKings for sending me to Texans Chiefs. I had a really good time. The Jamal Charles thing, that was like very unexpected. And you're going to see like, I think I'm going to get like 2 different clips with him because I spent like 5 minutes with Jamal Charles. That was it. And I was even proud of myself for doing that because I am such a I don't want to bother people person, especially when it comes to sticking microphones in people's faces. I really don't like bothering people. And it was he kind of came around the DraftKings area very unexpectedly. So I kind of asked him, I'm like, you know what? F it. Like, I want to talk to this guy. He's really good. Like the yards per carry king, one of the best running backs of the 2010s, yada, yada, yada. People love him. I love Jamal Charles. So he kind of was coming around. So I'm like, what can I do that would like maybe get him like excited and like fired up? That's a little different. So, everybody knows like the Amon-Ra St. Brown, the list that he keeps of all the receivers that were that was taken before him in the draft. Jesse Armstead, I remember this from Bleeding Blue when I did the Giants History podcast. I'm pretty sure Jesse Armstead, linebacker for the Giants, memorized like every single person that was picked in front of him in the NFL draft. And Armstead, I'm pretty sure, was picked when they had more than 7 rounds. So he memorized like every single linebacker that was like taken in front of him too. Remember that being a thing that I would talk with Snacks about. So I asked Jamal Charles, can you name the 8 running backs that were taken in front of you in the 2008 NFL draft? Jamal Charles was taken in the 3rd round, like Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, Rashard Mendenhall, Matt Forte. Those are some of the running backs even that were taken before Charles. Kevin Smith of the Lions too. Who is that exactly? And dude, he got him like that. And he basically got him almost in order too. I'm like, you're probably a dude. You're probably a competitor and a dude, knowing how good you are and how good you are. You probably had that shit memorized, and he did. And I also like brought up like 5 of his teammates from the 2013 Chiefs where they went 11-5. Can you tell me where these guys went to college? And he basically nailed that too. So Jamal Charles was an awesome dude, awesome trip. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you because without you listening to this and without you even going on, for those of you that like JM football stuff too, the trivia and a lot of my shorter videos that I do, wouldn't be possible. And I thought it was a good trip, and I had a lot of fun, and we filmed a lot of content too. So it was cool. Before I get to Dan Duggan, I do want to talk to you about DraftKings, and I also want to talk to you about just like the experience at Arrowhead and like the fan atmosphere and the fan environment there, because that was probably the thing that threw me off the most. And then we'll get to Dan Duggan, good 53-minute interview with him. Today's episode is sponsored by the DraftKings Casino. The holidays just got hotter. Cash eruption continues to spread the heat and cheer at DraftKings Casino. When 6+ chili scatters hit, things heat up, trigger the cash eruption bonus, and watch the reels lock in for fiery respins and jackpot wins. New players play $5 and get 500 spins over 10 days on cash eruption games. Sign up today using promo code JMFootball so they know that we sent you. DK Casino is safe, secure, and reliable. Again, like, thank you. Again, without all of you, I wouldn't be able to do some cool stuff like this. And it was really strange. Like, I'm expecting going to Arrowhead, like, this is the best fan atmosphere and fan environment, maybe outside of Lambeau in the NFL, maybe outside of Pittsburgh, like, the classic franchises, right? That's what I was expecting. And they even bill it as, like, in the stadium, they have loudest stadium in the world. That's what they have. Definitely was not louder than Clemson LSU when I went to Death Valley in South Carolina this past summer. Was not louder than that. Even though I guess there are numbers that say that Arrowhead is the loudest in the world. But when the fans were into it, they were in the game. Like, it was loud, it was cool, but the second, and I mean the second, that the Chiefs, because they were down by 10, and then they eventually kind of tie it up, they come back in the second half. But even when they were down by 10 early on, they were down 10-0, quiet, silent. And then, after Rashee Rice drops that fourth down with 5.5 minutes left, and the Chiefs are still down by 7. It's not like they're down by 10 or 14. They're down by 7 points. With 5.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the Chiefs are 6-6. Their season's on the line. Half the stadium got up and left. I was like, in the moment, I usually don't have like these hot takes like sports radio stuff. I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is a spoiled fan base. When your season is on the line and there's 5.5 minutes left and you still have timeouts and the Texans offense certainly didn't look all that great. There was still an opportunity to win the game. And the fans are leaving with the season on the line on Sunday Night Football. It was a really strange look where I'll tell you what, now to bring this back to the Giants, I will take all of us sometimes going after each other or, being passionate about should the Giants do this, should the Giants do that, and arguing over that and being passionate versus being like spoiled the second that stuff goes wrong. Because, oh my God, I was telling our social media guy, I was like, I'm very may well sacrifice your life to have the type of success that the Chiefs have had since Patrick Mahomes has taken over a quarterback the last 6 years. Like, I would sacrifice your life. And I feel good saying that. The second that they faced any adversity, the fans just got up and left. That is crazy to me. It was so crazy. So, kind of made me a little thankful about this fan base where, I guess the thing that I see people complain about the most with our own fan base is that I guess we'll just bicker with each other, and I'll take bickering and being passionate about something versus like leaving and not caring the second that we go through any kind of adversity. So very strange. I didn't expect that from Arrowhead and those types of fans and shit like that. I don't know, and a lot of people didn't even seem to be shocked because we made that video, and I was like, where are they going? Where are you going? And a lot of fans commented like, this isn't shocking. Okay, well, that was my experience at Arrowhead. Again, I want to thank you. Thank you to DraftKings. And also thank you to Dan Duggan. I'm thinking about getting a lot of the beat reporters. I want to get the beat reporters like a mini Christmas gift, especially the ones that came on the show this year, like Dunleavy, Jordan, Duggan, Art. I'm probably forgetting some, but I'm like very appreciative of them like coming on this year. Like especially, I mean, all three of these guys, like Duggan, Ryan, Jordan, I sometimes would text them or message them on a whim being like, hey, I need you. Can you come on today? And they're like, yeah, they'll do it. So I kind of appreciate them, and I want to get them like a little Christmas gift. Let me know if you have like those types of people in your life, like just simple, easy, quick stuff. Let me know what you would get them. How about that? All right, here's Dan Duggan of the Athletic. All right, welcome back to Talking Giants. If I sound groggy, it's because I just started speaking words at 8:30 in the morning here in Kansas City, Missouri. But I have Dan Duggan here of the Athletic. We've been playing a game of tag over the last couple weeks because doing new stuff, trying to get more in-season interviews. But Dan, how are you doing, man? How's your bye week been?
Yeah, it was nice. It was good to get a little break, kind of a quick turnaround from that Monday night game right into the Shane presser. Then able to decompress for a little bit. Of course, this team can never like stay out of the news. You got an assistant D-line coach, Brian Cox, getting fired on Friday night when I'm sitting there watching a movie with my family. Like, I'm going to finally put my phone down. And then you're like, oh my God, you kidding me? So that kind of just sums up the state of things around this team. But then, I was able to mostly unplug this weekend, which was good. And now the beauty of the late bye is we only have 4 more weeks to go. So it's like the end is near, and just kind of got to get to the finish line here.
You're ready for it to be over? I'm ready for it to be over.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying at this point.
Yeah, because the real season's going to start in January. So the pressure was last week. I don't want to beat a dead horse and like give a full recap of that. But still, I think the biggest thing to come out of that, you wrote about it. Everything's going to be evaluated at the end of the season, and Shane included saying ownership will evaluate the entire football operation. That's the biggest thing to come out of it. And how you knew I think that wasn't just lip service is because I don't think Shane was anywhere near the same pompously confident man that he was kind of like last year around this time. So Dan Duggan, I will ask you this. You mentioned that there's 4 games left, and I think 3 of them are winnable for the New York Giants, unfortunately. What in the world is there even left to evaluate? The age-old question with this team.
Right. I mean, you're asking me like little to nothing. I mean, I don't know how anything that can happen over the next 4 weeks can overcome, I feel like, the insurmountable amount of evidence of, the poor job Joe Schoen's done in, almost 4 full years. But this is the Giants. And we know if there's one thing this franchise does, it's overvalue meaningless games in December. I mean, you can just kind of go back through the history time and time again where a lot of times after the fact, it'll come out that they were going to do something, but then they saw something late in the year, whether that's, run it back with Eli or give a coach another year, whatever it may be. Or even with Joe Judge's instance, it cost him his job. What happened in games when the season was long over. So I think it does govern. I can go back to last year. One last example, obviously that Colts game. If they lose that game and end the season on like what it would have been 12, 13 game losing streak, I don't think Brian Daboll survives that. But since they had that big Drew Lock game and they could point to that as like, look, see, like we got a good quarterback, we can win. That justified bringing him back. So I think we definitely have a track record of them making decisions based on these games, which again, I don't think should. And you look at it, I mean, like you said, these next 3 games are very winnable. I mean, they're actually favored against Washington. Been a while since you could say that. Now listen, if they go 0-4 or even 1-3, that probably does and should seal Joe Schoen's fate. I just think the questionable area gets into. So if they go 2-2, what if they go 3-1? Why would that change anything? Again, you're playing the dregs of the league, just like you. I mean, you're playing the Commanders, who, what have they lost? They've lost like 10 in a row or something crazy, I think. And then the Raiders, just totally inept. And the Vikings, obviously have major issues there. And even that Cowboys game, I think that was the one game you said, all right, well, if they come in here and you knock them out of the playoffs, I don't know that the Cowboys are going to be playing for anything in that game. So to me, it shouldn't mean anything. To the Giants, I think it could mean a lot, which again, I think is just emblematic of how poorly run they've been for the last decade plus, but probably going back further. They just obviously had a few nice runs in there, but I think the way that they look at December games and such is way overweighted from what it should be based on when you have a preponderance of evidence of whether someone can do the job or not by the time you get to this point.
When trying to predict and get in their heads of like, what's the rationale and the thought process? I have found myself saying the last couple of weeks, again, not what I think and not my own opinion, but like, okay, but what could their process be or their thought process be for this decision? I have found myself saying at the end of every sentence, this sounds silly, but I think this is maybe what they're thinking because they just have so much of a track record of doing the same thing over and over again, grasping for straws towards the end of the year. So really, I'm gonna invite you to do an exercise right now. And don't gasp when I say this sentence. Dan Duggan, you are John Mara, and you are inside his head. Okay? Don't tell me your opinion, but what are the things you, Dan Duggan, John Mara, what are the things going round in your head, his head, about this organization, about what he needs to do and how he needs to fix it? And then tell me your opinion, Dan Duggan, the things that he should be thinking about to fix it. But yeah, okay. That was a good way to line that up, but you know what
I'll see if I can work that out. I was going to cut you off there because when you were just laying the groundwork for that question, we almost have a running joke among the beat where we'll debate things all the time. It's, obviously what you love to do in this industry, in this field. And a lot of times we'll start making a case and someone has to step in like, no, you're applying like common sense and logic. You have to that's some of the decisions they make, like
throw it out.
Like with Graham Gano or, just an example like that. Like, well, obviously they won't go back to him. And it's like, no. You can't look at it like what you would do. You have to look at what they would do. Obviously they go back to him and he gets hurt like a week later. So it's like, you have to, when I try to cover this team, I have to do that. I have to divorce myself from like, what is the obvious, most logical move and say like, put the blue tint on and like, how do they kind of see the world and then try to apply, some sort of projection ability, which is hard to do. Being around the team as long as I have, I think with John Mara, if we're looking at it from his perspective, I think, obviously they made the coaching change. They're willing to do that. I think when you see this hesitancy to move on from Joe Schoen, so let's look at it again from John Mara's perspective. He's very sick. So that colors everything. It makes it almost awkward to have these conversations.
Yep.
At the same time, it's life goes on. Like, I don't know, it feels very dark and off-putting to even talk about like this. But again, like the Giants are going to go on regardless of, John Mara's health. But that does absolutely factor into things here because listen, a coaching search is a major process, a major undertaking. You got to do all this research. You're going to be flying to people. You're going to be doing day-long interviews, all that. That takes a toll on anybody, his age, let alone the health issues. But if you have Joe Schoen and the front office in place running or, leading the search, I think was how they worded it, that takes a little weight off you. If you fire the GM, now it's on ownership. You're running
everything.
You're running everything. And now again, I don't think a $10 billion organization should operate that way, but we operate in the real world. I mean, Steve Tisch is older, very detached from things. I don't think he's going to be like, I'll take over. I'm going to run the show. Again, I don't know exactly how much John is doing day to day, but it's certainly less. You see him less. He's not traveling to games. So I don't know that he's up for traversing the country and going to meet and before a playoff game in Denver with their assistant GM, whoever. I'm just, obviously using a made up example. So I do think that is a factor. And again, if it might be the best card that Joe Schoen has to play, the fact that it's a hard time for ownership to make a change there. At the same time, there are other people involved, Chris Mara, Tim McDonald, who are family members who can step up. So I think if it gets to a point where they look at it like, all right, it's untenable. And now I don't know, again, we go back to your first question, like what do these last 4 games mean? Let's just say they lose all 4 and they look like a dysfunctional outfit like they did on Monday Night Football and they end the season on an 11-game losing streak and they're 2-15. There's no possible way they can bring Joe Schoen back. Again, I don't think 3-14 or 4-13 should make a difference either, but there's just no way. If they're 2-15, they just become a laughing stock. And you think of how ugly it would have to go to lose these next 4 games. So they would have to have the capability of doing that search. But I do think if you're saying, why do we get this sense that they don't want to do it? I think that's a lot of it. It's like, man, that's a major overhaul. Even in perfect health, I don't think, you saw last year, he really didn't want to make the change. And when he explained why, it wasn't really great reasons. It was kind of like, well, it's kind of, we're running it a certain way. We've made a lot of changes. I don't want to make all those changes again. Again, like we joke about like, modernizing the draft room. Like the next GM presumably will know how to like work Wi-Fi and stuff like that too. But I think for someone in John Mara's stage, like, man, Joe's, there are some good things here, whether you're going to talk about draft picks or this and that. And it's like, if we just give him one more year, like he, rather than, the idea of tearing it down, starting over, I can see that perspective. I just think it's insane to look at like, let's try to maintain continuity with someone who's proven that they can't do the job. Now, again, maybe he somehow survives and I look silly in a year when they get a new coach in here and it's like Mike Vrabel and, you're talking about being the number 1 seed in the NFC. I will go out on that limb and say that could happen. I just have seen no evidence from 4 years of Joe Schoen that would happen. I just think he just hasn't done a good enough job. But I think if your ownership, a lot of that goes into it. So then obviously if you're asking what I would do, I think I've made that quite clear in my comments here, in my coverage. I mean, I just don't understand how you could justify bringing someone back with the job they've done. And this is probably a long answer. It might even be jumping into one of your other questions, but I look at it like this. What's the advantage to bringing Joe Schoen back? Like if you're going to hire a new coach, just wipe the slate clean. There's no disadvantage to that, in my opinion. Whereas if you bring a new coach in with Joe Schoen, you have that odd timeline thing. And of course, maybe it's Mike Vrabel, but maybe it's, you win 4 or 5 games next year. Well, that the first year coach gets a pass in my book, but the GM now would be going 5 years in with another terrible season. Yep. Now what do you? Now you're going to fire him a year late, and now you're going to be on a different disjointed cycle. Like it doesn't take that much foresight to play out that could very well happen. So why even invite that scenario? If you just fire him, start fresh, let the coach and GM come in like you thought you're getting Shane and Dable, like on the same timeline, come in with the same vision, they're going to get a pass in year 1. They're going to get a pass into year 2 and year 3. If you keep Shane, you're eliminating that, or you're making that very complicated unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Yeah. I kind of retired. I had that big talking point. And this is, late October, November, where they're like, yeah, you can maybe start to see something here, but then they start to just lose all these games in such the same way. And we're in the middle of December. There's 4 games left and there's 2 wins again, and now I think there's starting to be just so much breadcrumbs between, your colleague at The Athletic, Ian O'Connor, has been kind of banging the drum being like, he's not as safe as we think. He's not as safe as maybe you all think. And then also his overall tone and demeanor at the presser kind of has shifted me in a different direction. But your first point, like I was banging that drum of John Mara's health and on top of, outside of just speculating about that, like that's kind of like the cherry on top of why making an entire regime change is so difficult. Because take out the anger about this team just being bad, right? Like the human element is getting everybody out of that, not just coaching, which NFL coaching cycles, coaches can kind of get in and get out. They're used to moving all around and things like that. But removing an entire building and then getting everybody in, and then also having everybody that's still there that remains from the old regime kind of walking around, walking on eggshells for 1 to 2 years. I think John Mayer's taken that into account too, of how Joe Schoen kind of effed up those first 2 draft classes. Oh, but he didn't have his full people in there, so John Mayer feels bad about that. So I think all these things, and again, Mayer's health being the cherry on top of that, could be reasons why they don't make a change. But I think I've changed my opinion and thought process on, because everything is, just like you said, it's so bad, and the evidence as to why they should move on is just so insurmountable that I think eventually they will. So,
yeah, and that's where we come to these last 4 games, though. That's where they're clinging, I think, hoping to have some reason. Because listen, if the season ended after that Patriots game and like Black Monday was the day of Joe Schoen's presser, how could ownership get up there and say, yeah, we're going in the right direction? But it's like this last 4 games gives them something potentially to cling to. Again, you and I can sit here and say it doesn't matter if you go into Vegas and beat the Raiders. But if at the end of the day, you can sit there and say, we went 3-1 down the stretch. After we got Mike Caffrey got his feet under him. We made the DC change. You saw we closed out game, whatever, Jackson Dart presumably will play well if you're going to win 3 of the next 4 games. So I think that is just the thing. They need something to be able to sell, to hang their hat on. I mean, remember some of the ridiculous things we've heard at postseason pressers. My favorite one ever was when Dave Gettleman had the thing about, like, they scored the most points in the NFC East. I think one of those years was
2018.
The hell cares? Like, what does that mean? Anything? You won like 4 or 5 games. But again, that's the type of way I think they're operating. It's like, just give me something. Hey, we finished with 3 out of 4 wins. Hey, we held double-digit leads and finished them. Like, whatever it can be, just to spin. And that's why I think these 4 games are important, because if they just, again, if they go 2-2 or worse, I just don't think they could even sell it to themselves, sell it to the fan base. But again, I think the fact that they're leaning to wanting to keep him, he needs to give them something. And that's what these last 4 games are obviously his last gasp in that department.
All right, before we keep talking with Duggan, today's episode is sponsored by Hims. Confidence shouldn't be complicated. Through Hims, you can skip the guesswork and get access to care that actually fits your lifestyle. Straightforward, stress-free, and designed around you. Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatment options for ED like Hardmin, SexRx plus Climax Control if prescribed. Hims offers access to ED treatments options ranging from trusted generics that cost 95% less than brand names to hard mints if prescribed. This isn't one-size-fits-all care that forgets you in the waiting room. It's your health and goals put first, with real medical providers making sure you get what you need to get results. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/giants. That's hims.com/giants for your free online visit. Hims.com/giants. Actual price will depend on product subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Now let's keep talking with Dan Duggan. Last question about like the pressure, but it's related to like, the state of things. So you wrote that, that Joe Schoen indicated that there won't be any significant steps made in the head coaching search up until after the season, and that makes sense. Like, especially for guys that are currently hired right now, you can't talk to anybody, but you can talk to, hey, Louis Anarumo, who's in the Giants front office. You can talk to him. You can talk to Chris Shula's best friend about Chris Shula and all that kind of stuff. So the focus is on supporting interim head coach Mike Kafka for the final 4 games. So I've asked this a couple times, and I'm still wondering this myself. If Joe Schoen, it was written, Joe Schoen's going to lead the search for the next head coach after Brian Daboll was fired, and that's kind of what we all thought. But then Joe Schoen said there won't be any significant steps made kind of in season. Who is actually leading the search for a new head coach?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think it depends on what stage we're talking about. Right now, I do think it's Joe Schoen's leading it. Because again, I think he said, you're doing some research. He obviously, in his kind of walk-off answer, basically indicated he's been talking to coaching agents, I presume, when he says, we'll be able to fill the job. It's like the one moment of like slight defiance in that whole presser where he kind of like, tucked his tail.
Yeah.
Saying, like,
and then he walked away.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Like, I'm here. That won't scare people away. But so that's all they're doing at this stage. Because like you said, you can't talk to Chris Shula, you can't talk to Lou Anarumo, but you can talk to their agents, and you can get a feel that, Chris Shula's agent, he would take that job. Doesn't matter who's there. Like, you can get those conversations. But so what? That's not any sort of proprietary information that Joe Schoen brings to the table, or some expertise he brings. Like Tim McDonald can make those calls, Kevin Abrams, Brandon Brown, anyone can make those calls. when we get to use their phrase they love to use, like Jason Garrett used it, which was so funny because he's like the most like milquetoast guy, and Kafka used it. When we get to nut cutting time
Oh,
on,
sure.
on this decision, it's going to be ownership making the call. Now, whether that's John Mara, like a compromised John Mara, Steve Tisch, checking in on like a Zoom. I don't know how it's actually gonna be made, but that much is clear. Like ownership is gonna make the decision. So basically, Joe Schoen is like doing like fact finding and doing research. And again, like there's no real like skill involved in that, because I mean, like we all can Google top 10 head coaching candidates and come up with the same list. So I don't know that he provides any particular invaluable insight or perspective that like without him they'd be lost. So I think at this point, again, the point about supporting Kafka that he made multiple times is interesting, because you say, why not just knock out Mike McCarthy, Antonio Pierce, whoever's out there available, just to get those out of the way to save some workload in that first week of January when everybody's going to be going all over the country to talk to assistants on playoff teams. And I think the thought there is, so like say it's Mike McCarthy, kind of awkward if he comes in, you give him the grand tour and like, oh, sorry, Mike Kafka, like, oh, just showing your replacement, what the office. You I do understand that's a little sticky. I mean, I guess you could go meet him at some airport hotel conference room, but I guess they're probably looking, let's just say all of it till after the season. So again, if that's what you're doing, then I don't think Joe Schoen's stature matters at all, because again, he's making these calls. I'm sure there's some Google Doc or whatever they're storing the notes in. Tim McDonald has access to that. Chris Mara has access to that. Like, so again, he's not doing anything that like, if they lost him from this operation, they'd be like, oh my gosh, where do we start in the coaching search? They're all obviously intimately involved. He's checking with them. They're bouncing ideas of, these are all assumptions I'm making, but it seems like the only way to handle this. So if we get to Black Monday and they're 2-15 and they decide, all right, we got to pull the plug on Joe Schoen, they wouldn't be like what do we do on this head coaching search? You know what I mean? Like they're involved, and I don't think anything he has done to this stage is, again, like some proprietary thing that only Joe Schoen could handle, only Joe Schoen could do. Again, of course, the biggest problem there is that now you're going from a head coach search to a GM and head coaching search. But again,
Yes.
teams do that every January. The Giants have done that. I mean, not particularly well, but they're capable of juggling those two things. But so yeah, I think that what they're doing now is very basic stuff. And again, like, okay, you talk to Bob Lamont, who's actually Joe Schoen's agent, like, I'm sure he has 5 guys that'll be up for this job. Like, I don't know how much benefit that is to this, but you got to talk to the actual individual. And again, knowing they're interested, yeah, I would. Every coordinator in the league is gonna be interested, but now are they more interested in this job than the Cardinals job if that opens, or whatever job opens? That's the stuff we can't know until we find out. Is Mike Tomlin going to get retained? Is Harbaugh going to stay in Baltimore? Like all these different things, just all up in the air. So it's kind of almost not a waste of time at this point, but it's why I always thought in-season firings were overrated, because what you can actually get done at this stage is pretty limited. I mean, the same calls that Joe Schoen's making now, he can talk about them. If Brian Dable was still here, he would still be doing some back channel conversations, I'm sure, to know where candidates stood. So yeah, I don't think much happens between now and the end of the season. And then once the season ends, again, I think ownership is going to ultimately make the decision. Someone's going to run point, whether it's Joe Schoen or it's Chris Mara or Tim McDonald, because Joe Schoen is out. Right. Kevin Abrams, who's obviously kind of a lifer here too, like he could run point on setting up the interviews. Again, because like Joe Judge got hired, it was because he wowed John Mara. It wasn't because he wowed Dave Gettleman. So ownership is still going to make the ultimate decision when meets the road.
Yeah, which I think I'm kind of glad that this is now becoming a slight worry of mine. But we're talking about the timeline for head coach, the timeline of head coach, but I'm thinking about also the timeline of GM, especially. They knew, and even Dave Gettleman knew towards the, once December, November comes rolling around, that he's gone, he's going to retire, he's not going to be the GM. So they can all openly, like, Dave Gettleman knows that they're going to be looking for a new GM, and that's going to be like an okay thing. I don't know if that's happening right now. Like, with 4 games left to evaluate, what are you evaluating? I don't know if that's happening right now with Joe Schoen and a possible current vacant GM spot. So, I mean, again, this isn't even a question, but something I have now started to think about is what is going to be this timeline of a possible new GM vacant spot, and are they even discussing that? Are you going to miss out on these head coaches, especially if, like a Kevin Stefanski, one of these coaches lets go, that probably would get scooped up by another team? So that could be another reason why they bring back Schoen, but hopefully not.
Yeah, and listen, we can discuss this right now, but I think it's one of these things where it's like, until we get to Black Monday and at least have dust settle around the league to know who actually is available. Because the we can sit here and say Kevin Stefanski, Mike Tomlin, like we have no idea if they're actually going to be available. We don't know what other teams are going to fire their head coach, and there's always a surprise. Maybe that job jumps to the top. 'Cause I think the Giants is viewed as a pretty attractive opening, but if some playoff team falters and all of a sudden like, oh, you can go coach Josh Allen, they would just make it because McDermott gets bounced in the first round, whatever it may be. Like we don't know that, so that's going to be a bunch of variables that it's just fun to speculate. But again, I mean, teams make GM hires every offseason. So it's not like this like task like, oh, how could the Giants ever do it? I mean, it's just part of the deal. I mean, again, the same way you can Google the top 10 head coaching candidates, you can Google the top 10 GM candidates just as easily, get those guys in. Again, are they doing that right now? Probably not, or probably less so, because again, like that job isn't open, but it's the same way. Like Tim McDonald or Chris Merritt, if we're going to sit here and talk about how respected these guys are around the league, how they've been at it for so long, that other teams want to hire them because they're so good, that means they have connections. So they can have casual conversations with agents, and there's only like a handful of agents, honestly. This is another thing I don't know if the general public understands. Like you talk about player agents, like there's Drew Rosenhaus, there's Dave Mulugeta, there's like 2,000 player agents. You can count on like two hands how many like relevant coaching and executive agents. They like it's such a monopoly on that. So you're just having conversations with Trace Armstrong and Bob Lamont and these types of guys. You're going to be able to pick their brains without overtly saying we're going to fire Joe, but it's like, oh yeah, how's that assistant GM and with the Rams? Whatever. Like you can have those conversations, have an idea, and obviously you kick it into high gear if you do make the change. But but again, that's hard. That's why again, it's much easier just to keep the GM and not go through all that and the fear of the unknown. My problem is the known has been so bad. I can't be afraid of it. Like I've had people say sometimes, less so lately, like, what if the next guy's worse? It's like, you literally, with the Titans win yesterday, the Giants and Titans now are tied for the worst record in the NFL over the past 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. So like you literally couldn't get worse.
Yeah.
Not a big fear of mine.
Yeah. And the reason why I brought up the timeline of Joe Schoen, with Gettleman retiring and knowing that he's gone. The day that Gettleman retired was fired, I put out, here's a look at Joe Schoen, because I think there were some people, and I'm not a reporter, but I mean, I think even sometimes I would like to think if I even get wind of something that, all right, like other people maybe know about it, especially if it finds its way to me. So I put that video out, and I'm like, I kind of feel good that this is going to be the guy they have, because they identified this guy in December. So the reason why I brought that up is just they identified Joe Schoen kind of early on. I think Adam Peters came in there and like unexpectedly maybe blew them away, but they still went with their guy that they were kind of leaning towards. Are they going to get that guy that they're leaning towards in the month of December, even with Joe Schoen still here? And if they don't, how long will it take them? And we really don't know. We don't really have any precedent on this question. How long will it take them to fully identify that guy if they don't do it in the month of December, and then Joe Schoen's gone, and then they kind of have to start with just those back channel conversations that they kind of had behind people's backs. So that's why I brought that up. I want to move to the locker room. You're there all the time. You talk to a lot of people. I'm sure this isn't the most apathetic locker room you've seen, but I'm sure you would still describe it as that. Just a bunch of guys that are numb to this disease of losing, right?
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's, that's a good word, numb. It's like, you'd go into the locker room after some of those brutal losses, like the Denver one in particular, because that was just such a collapse. It was like very raw. I mean, like Brian Burns was like sobbing in his locker, which you rarely see in the NFL locker room, and he's usually a pretty composed guy. And there was kind of some anger. I remember there was some anger, even directed at the specialist, because of course Jude missed that PAT, which I always think that's funny. Like the only guys who like get ripped out by teammates is like the specialist. You've seen that like Deebo Samuel like punched someone last year. I can't remember if it was the kicker or the long snapper when Moody missed a kick, but that game was like, oh my, like this team is like so raw emotionally. Hasn't really felt like that since then. I think now it's becoming a little mundane and they're just used to it. I mean, like that Detroit game was kind of like, I don't know, man. Like it's just kind of shrugging the shoulders a little bit. Like, I don't know how it keeps happening. Because again, these guys are human. I think they see the end is near here too. I mean, I think the thing a lot of the vets say, which is very true, and I don't care if it's selfish, it benefits the team. Like you still got to put your own tape out there. Even you heard Charlie Bullen say it. I think you heard Brian Burns say it when Dable got fired, but Bullen in the Hard Knocks clip, like you don't get to sit down with the GM this March and say, oh, well, that was the game after our coach got fired. That's why I didn't play hard. So there's some of that. Like, I don't think that like the effort or anything is really like waning. The thing I always say in these situations is like maybe Deontay Banks aside or a play here and there aside, guys play hard for 60 minutes on Sunday. The question you always have, are they going in for treatment on the off day? Are they watching film on Tuesday night or are they going into the city? Are they Friday night? Are they still getting together and going over the checks that they're gonna have at the line? Or guys, playing video games or hanging out with their girlfriends, like whatever. That's the stuff that again we don't know, but like I think it's human nature. Maybe you kind of coast a little bit. And again, that Patriots game was the first time where really like, oof, like the wheels kind of came off here. And I think that they have a chance here. You got the bye to regroup. You go into these games again are winnable. Maybe that gets them up a little bit because again, these guys, whatever people think about them, they are like wildly competitive. Like at no point are these guys like other than like the Golden Tate golf clubs in the locker room, they're not actually thinking about like the offseason. Like they do want to go out and like have 10 catches for 200 yards if you're Wan'Dale Robinson. You want to have 5 sacks if you're Brian Burns. Like they do still want to win and play really well when game day rolls around. But yeah, I mean, it's just like it's unbelievable if you think about some of the guys who've been here for a while. It's like 2022 was obviously the one outlier, but like for Darius Slayton, Dexter Lawrence, like all you've really known is losing, or even the young guys who maybe the rookie class aside, because I think they're almost like too naive to have, really understand what they're getting into. It's probably starting to wear on like a guy like Jackson Dart now, but guys who came in at 23, 24, it's like all you've known is losing. Brian Burns, guy who probably think, oh, I'm moving on up. Now Carolina's like in the playoff race and he's here on another team with 2 wins. It's just like, it's just hard to even wrap your mind around like how much of a toll it must take. And you tip your hat to guys like Andrew Thomas and Brian Burns who continue to play at a high level for such a bad team. But there is just a collective like apathy to your point. It's just like, here we go again. Like, I mean, and again, that's why I just don't think anything can really turn around at this point because now we're playing on the string at this point. Guys will play hard. I don't think the results are really gonna sting the way they did. Again, that Denver game was like, man, we were a chance. If they won that Denver game, I like. There's always like kind of these moments, and you win that game, you're riding high, and then it just obviously that was the kind of beginning of the end. I mean, it started this 7-game skid they're on right now, with no end in sight unless they can rally here against Washington.
Do you think Dexter Lawrence, this is his last season as a Giant?
I don't think so. I mean, I think obviously a lot depends on if Shane is here. I think a new broom sweeps clean a lot. So maybe a new GM could come in and say, all right, what can we get for him? You see like the Quentin Williams trade. Could we get something like that for Dexter Lawrence? But I think that's another thing with Shane. If he's back, like there was the whole talk last offseason, I'll do on a quick detour, but like, oh, he didn't make any Hail Mary moves. It's like, but you don't know in his heart of hearts when he's, sitting at home at 11 o'clock, what his motives are. And so I do wonder if he is retained, how much that is going to shade how he does. Like, is he going to be more motivated to give Wan'Dale Robinson a big contract so he can say, look, this guy, I drafted him. He played really well. He deserves this. And you can make the case probably either way, but that's what I'm saying. You don't know if he's looking at it from a totally unbiased view. And of course, he probably wouldn't be. And same with like Dexter Lawrence. It's like, if I'm Joe Schoen, it's like, do I really want to kind of like ship out a guy I made a big commitment to? Whereas a new GM might come in and say, listen, that film wasn't very good this year. We can get something now, a year early rather than a year late. But I still think he's here. Because I mean, I think obviously it's been a weird year for him. It's been a bad year for him. He's still a good player. And I'm not in the mind of like, you get better by getting rid of your best players. That's always like the backwards thing. Like people want to run out the best players. Like, no, run out the guys who are playing next to him who stink and get better players in those roles. And maybe that'll actually help him and help the team. But I, obviously I've hemmed and hawed and hesitated on this because it's been a weird vibe with him. I mean, you go back even to the summer, he clearly wanted a bigger contract and deserved one coming up last year. And you see the way that DT market's exploded, like guys like Milton Williams are like lapping Dex in the market. And they threw him a little, incentive package. I think it's like $3 million. And it was actually real incentives. He's gonna, even with a bad year, he's gonna get like $1.5 million. So that shows you that it wasn't just like a token, like, here, go away. It was like, all right, let's make a good faith effort to satisfy you for now. And obviously we're gonna revisit that after the season. Now the season he's had, he does not have a heck of a lot of leverage to go pound on the table. I deserve $30 million a year. At the same time, he's going to look at it and say, yes, I do. I've still been a really good player for all this time. Again, I'm getting doubled all the time. But whatever his case will be, I don't think he's going to sit there, but you know what? You're right. I should just, take my money and be quiet. And he's going to want more. So how they navigate that will be interesting. But if I had to say today on December 8th, whatever it is, I think he'll be back. but I can't sit there and say with 100% certainty because there's too many variables, even regardless of Dex, like who's actually the one making that decision.
Yeah, he's been here. You mentioned like, hey, he's been here, but physically, I am questioning if he has mentally been here and if he has mentally checked out because it has gotten to the point where injury, whether the elbow's still messed up, I'm sure he's dealing with a bunch of other little things because that's the type of impact that he takes on every single play, every single game. And this is a season where we've played 13 games so far this year, and he's still going. Where I feel like two out of the last 3 years, we're looking at Dexter Lawrence being like, I think he's out at this time of the year, right? So
But I'll say this about Dex. I don't feel like I know him super well. He's been around for 7 years. Talk to him. You see him on clips. He's got the the little funny soundbite. Does his dancing, but like he's not someone I really feel like I have a deep understanding. I think I can't speak for other people on the beat, but you don't really ever see too much coming from his perspective, or he doesn't really ever sit down and do a one-on-one where he really opens up. So I don't know. Like you're talking about like being checked out, like it just has been a weird vibe. So we easily could get to March thinking, everything's fine. And then you come to find out, he's got Joel Siegel, a big, powerful agent, might go into the GM's office and say, listen, we're out. Like trade it, you see that happen all the time. And then you might get into a Trey Hendrickson situation or a Micah Parsons where it drags on. It might not happen, but I can't rule that out. And again, I say that because in full disclosure, I just don't really know where Deck is coming from because he says the right things, mostly on the record. And there isn't much more beyond that. So I don't know where his head is at, where his heart is at. I think we can look at from the outside and say, like, it doesn't seem like he's having a hell of a time and really enjoying himself these last couple of years. But you just don't know what that means, how that's going to manifest going forward. Because he also has said, I want to be up in the Ring of Honor. I want all that stuff, which, most guys say. But I don't know what's like in his heart because he's just kind of a guy who, kind of keeps it surface level with the media. And again, I don't think I just speak for myself. I don't really feel like he opens up very much at all. So it's a bit of a mystery.
All right, we're taking a break because we got to talk about SeatGeek. Football, obviously in full swing. The playoffs are nearing, and the NBA and NHL are ramping up as well. And with SeatGeek, the MLB's official ticket marketplace, your tickets are fully guaranteed and instantly fulfilled in your account after purchase. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the number one rated ticketing app. We were just in Kansas City, Missouri. I was talking about it at the top of the show. What did we do to buy our tickets? In a suite, by the way. It was pretty sweet, if you know what I mean. We went to SeatGeek and we used code GIANTS2025 for 10% off our tickets at SeatGeek. And that's what you can do as well. Code GIANTS2025 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code GIANTS2025. Thank you to SeatGeek. Back to the show. I think if you get the right messaging in here, whether that be GM, which I don't really think it'll come down to the GM. I think it'll come down to the coach that'll kind of sit him down and really just butter him up, man. Be like, you're the dude, you're the guy, we need you, and kind of, maybe there is some sort of middle ground that a front office could come with. I mean, do you just give a guy a pay bump? Because that's seemingly what he may be looking for. I don't know, especially if you want to set that precedent, but it's weird. It's a weird vibes. And I'm with you. If we're in March and we hear Dexter Lawrence request a trade, that's not something that's going to shock me unless they could get just totally new messaging in and kind of, I think, get him back on board. So, Abdul Carter, what in the world is happening? I mean, you talked about guys that it's not just about showing up on Sundays, not just showing up on game days, but what are you doing in the middle of the week? I think Abdul Carter is the epitome of that conversation right now. Is this something that could be a long-term problem? Because we kind of knew that there was maybe a little bit of character concerns with some pre-draft rumors that we heard, or is this just the manifestation of a culture of a lack of accountability here?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I was talking that the context of that earlier answer was like, as the season got bad, guys might be doing less. He's kind of been like this from day one, from what I gather. Like you said, there was some character red flags and stuff like that. Like, I don't think he was just like, he's not some Eagle Scout who's just going to do everything by the book and, be on time, be early, do all that stuff. Like, I think that was known. And I think he came into a bad situation with a head coach who just gives the rookies, gives the young stars the keys to the kingdom from day one. And I think I think that's a really poor way to manage things, period. But I think particularly with guys who obviously might have a tendency to stray off track, you're just enabling that. And then, again, that's when obviously the first report came out that I had when he missed the drive against the Packers and whether his eyes were closed or not in the bed. We don't need to to rehash that. He was in a bed, a therapy bed, and missed a walkthrough. But I was told at that time that was not the first time he had been late. I don't know if he had missed meetings before, but I know late had been a common thing. And then I remember there was pushback on that, and that didn't age too well when, 2 weeks later he missed another meeting. So I mean, again, it's very, you have to be pretty naive to believe, oh, and these are the only 2 meetings he missed all year. I mean, again, it had been a trend, I think, with Dable. He just tried not to rock the boat. I think he understood, like, if I have the players having my back, that gives me a lot more leeway in terms of job security, because the quickest way is if people are going up the back stairs to the front office or ownership saying, like, this guy's this guy's that, get him out of here. Obviously, the coach is sunk then if you're losing. Whereas with Dable, it's like they never really had a problem with Dable because he was easy on them. I mean, you were a training camp, the practices were light. There wasn't any strict discipline. But again, you just create a monster, but you kind of do with young players where they think they're above everything and get away with things. And again, it kind of came home here with Carter, because once there was a coaching change, Kafka's tried to instill some discipline here. I don't want to say it's too little too late. I think it's too little too late for this year, especially when after it happened once, there was, oh no, he's learned his lesson, and oh yeah, I've learned my lesson. And then again, you can't even make it 2 weeks without having a pretty much a similar gaffe. But I do think that's why the next coach, it's going to be crucial to come in and set a tone from day one. Like, we're not buddy here. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but like, you need to just establish some firm guidelines. I think the word Kafka is used as like the standards. Like, you gotta set the standard and don't be flexible on it. Like, and the first offense is a fine, because it came out, I think Breer put out that, Dable tried fining him. Abdul Carter signed a $45 million contract. He's I mean, like, fully guaranteed. You're going to dock him a couple $100, $1,000. It's obviously, it wasn't making much of an impact. So whatever the standard is, you have to enforce it. And if guys aren't going to abide by it, then you got bigger problems. And so that's where we'll find out, with a new coach. I think we'll find out with Carter, because again, he said the right things after the second offense. It's like, at some point you got to actually see it. Although I will say the second one I heard was a little bit more of a miscommunication, where he's on the punt return team some weeks and other weeks he's not. Again, at the end of the day, it's on him, and so he got disciplined because the coaches obviously felt it was on him. But that one maybe wasn't as much of like him being like a delinquent. It was more just like that's where I think he starts to grow up, be a professional. Like, there's signs all over the building, digital meetings, schedules. Go talk to Gobi. Go talk to some vet on the, go talk to Neville Hewitt. Like, hey, am I on this week? There's ways you can proactively not let that happen. But I will say that one felt like it was less of like people, like players weren't as pissed at him about that one. Whereas the first one, they're like, get with the program here. Because again, it's happened, it's been a recurring thing. And then you just have vets in the locker room or even young players who are impressionable, but vets particularly look at like, man, like you just got to do this stuff. You might not want to, you might not be happy about it. You just got to do it. You got to be professional. So I think that obviously is something that he has to take upon himself. We consider and say, oh, the locker room leadership, the new coach, like he has to want it. He has to do it. Because the funniest part, I'm going on a tangent here. Usually when you hear about guys being late or missing stuff, it's the first meeting of the day. It's like they slept. When I heard he was sleeping, I assumed, oh, he was late to the facility. I didn't realize he was sleeping in the facility. Or if you miss a meeting, it's like, oh, well, you slept in, or you got in traffic because you cut it too close, like Kyle Oletta, and you do Grand Theft Auto and get pulled over. But no, he's missing meetings during the day, that's almost impossible to do. But that's where it shows you, I think, a lack of maturity, or really just professionalism. Like, how do you not know where you're supposed to be? How do you not make sure? How do you not set an alarm? How do you not get a support set?
And he's like in the building?
Yes. Like, come
that's awesome. Yeah, because you ain't, it's not exactly like the Meadowlands complex is a campus where you can go walk across the street. You would have to physically take you in your car and go somewhere, and go like at least 10 minutes away if you want to leave. He's in the building.
So that's where it's like, you got to just take it upon yourself here. So yeah, I mean, listen.
That makes me feel a little bit better. He's there.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. Showing up at 10 a.m. when the day starts at 8. That's way worse. This is it's a variable I hadn't really considered. Again, when someone told me he slept and missed a meeting, again, I assumed he was tucked in his bed, not in the therapy bed in the facility, and just not aware of the schedule. But yeah, so to put a bow on this, yeah, he certainly needs to. I mean, teammates have said this, so I don't feel out of line saying just grow up. Like, that's part of it. He's young, okay, but now you're pro, and now you've got 2 strikes on you. The public eye is gonna be on you. Like, don't let it happen again. Let this be the last time we talk about Abdul Carter missing meetings or anything like that.
And the biggest thing for him is, even at this point in the year, if he's missing meetings, team's bad, and everything like that, if he's got 6 sacks on the year, then 6 sacks with all these pressures, right? then we're looking at that and we're kind of like shrugging our shoulders. You know,
100%.
dude's got a sack and a half, and the one full sack he had was kind of like a debatable call from the game book on if it was should have been a tackle or a sack. So I don't know. Next head coach, new regime, whatever, come in and fix it. Everything will be great, right? Everything will be great. One more question before I let you go. Another season of no in-season extensions, too. And the big three are Jermaine Illuminor, Wan'Dale Robinson, Cordell Flott. So I'll just ask you all three in kind of one swoop. Jermaine Illuminor, guy that I think is going to be looking for his biggest NFL payday at the age of 30, and I think he has earned it. If Joe Schoen is GM, wouldn't he? You would think that you would want to prioritize arguably like one of his best moves as GM, let alone just free agency, like his best moves at GM. You mentioned Wan'Dale a little bit earlier, that Wan'Dale Robinson could be a situation where, especially if Joe Schoen is here, that they can point to and be like, look, we finally kept one of our good players, but do you think that his role is kind of replaceable despite him being 10th in receptions and 10th in yards? And then even are we overrating Cordell Flott's one good season? So we'll kind of, what's your take on those, the big three for who are eligible for those extensions?
Sure, let's do it as if Shane's here because it's too complicated to try and
for sure. 100%.
So let's say if Shane's here. It's funny, we're recording this on Monday morning. I don't know if this is probably going to drop on Tuesday. When's this going to drop?
Tomorrow. Tuesday.
Okay. I'm like almost holding out. Like they might just try to get something done today just to have some good press going into the week. Now, I think that ship is probably
it'll be when I'm on the plane home, naturally, because
but in Joe Schoen's history, he has waited usually till the bye week to engage in negotiations. And usually those have been like the most cursory things where it's like almost insulting. It poisoned the water with Saquon from that point on. It was actually detriment to have had those discussions because he came in so low and Saquon was obviously so high, but like coming with a low ball offer doesn't really do you any good, I feel like. I mean, it happened with Julian Love, it happened with Slayton last year. So I mean, I don't think it would even really benefit him to sit down and offer Wan'Dale Robinson like $10 million a year or something like that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm half joking, but like I wouldn't be surprised if like just to finally, I should say, I thought it might happen honestly like the day of the presser or the next day. Like just make some ridiculous, like Jermaine Illuminor's getting $20 million a year, whatever, like with unbelievable structure, just to have something to like the fan base would be your rally behind and Joe could point to. So the fact that now that we're at Monday of game week, probably not going to happen. And I think part of that is just the calendar. I mean, it's like if you're going to wait till the bye week with 4 weeks left, what would be the incentive for any of these guys to take a deal right now? Unless you're going to just meet, line by line, every desire they would have, because I mean, I got to stay healthy for 4 weeks and then I'm going to have 32 teams to bid on my services. So it just doesn't make sense. But the buys in week 4, or you do it in training camp, then guys are like, shit, I got to make it through a whole season healthy here. Let me just take the bird in hand. So I think the fact that you wait till the buy and such a late buy probably makes it pretty unlikely. So I think that's why we haven't seen anything, because that's just his MO. I think, again, there is probably a time where you have to cut off business talk, but I think, going forward, let's say he's back, like you could probably be a little more aggressive in the summer, even into training camp, and then maybe call it, once we get into week 1. Because I think you look around the league, a lot of times you see a lot of big extensions made like the Thursday of week 1, the Friday going into the opener. But so for those 3 guys in particular, I agree. I think you should do what it takes to get Illuminor, because you finally have this line at a level of competency. And, when you try and talk about that, even when Joe spoke in the presser, he was careful not to include any impending free agents in like this piece he was selling that are in place. He's talking about having a big time left tackle.
He's made that mistake before, saying we're going to re-sign Daniel Jones, and then he gets $40 million. So yeah.
He's not going to.
He doesn't make the same mistake twice, Dan.
There you go. He's learning. But he didn't mention the right side of the line. Obviously, he can't, because Van Roten is a free agent and Illuminor is a free agent. But so if you're going to just like let Illuminor walk and trust that Marcus Bowe is ready, like, man, that feels risky. But at the same time, Illuminor, I think if there's one thing that's clear, he is approaching this very much like a businessman. There's going to be no hometown discount. He is going to go find the best offer he can. He's very well aware. Like, he's always the one making like eyeball emojis or whatever when some right tackle gets a big deal. Like, he's keenly aware of the market. He has always kind of been like a 1-year contract guy, or like this little, like 2-year 14 he got from the Giants. Like, always these like really like low level deals. I mean, like James Hudson got the same type of contract as Illuminor, to put in perspective of where he was viewed when he signed with the Giants. So now he's kind of make up for lost time. So I think he's going to be big money. Now I would prioritize him over the other 2, but the age and what that price tag could be, that's hard. Wan'Dale's hard because he's a lot of the things that they probably thought he could and would be when they drafted him in the second round. And for 2 to 3 years, it didn't really look like it was going to happen. I was certainly, I said this one, the take I was most wrong on was like, I thought this downfield stuff with Wandale was kind of nonsense. And you saw it in the Cowboys game, obviously, but then you saw it again in the Lions game because that Cowboys game felt like a little bit of an outlier. But with Jameis slinging it, like he was making plays down the field, those corner routes and everything like that. So he made himself some money that game, and then he goes back out in New England the next week, and it's back to like 2023 and 2024 where it's 3-yard catches and getting your head taken off. So he's tricky, especially because I think the thing he's shown this year that's made himself some money is that he can play outside, which he's always been a slot guy. But when Neighbors went down and even Slayton was out, like he had no choice but to play outside. They're doing all the 2 tight end sets. He's playing outside. So that adds some value to him because you try and look at comps. Like Shakur from the Bills is probably the best comp, but I think Wandale has shown he has a more diverse game than him now and has been more productive. So Shakur got like 13, 14 million a year.
13.5, yeah. And I mean, honestly, like Wandale, like Cooper Kupp, I think it's like 15, 16-ish. Like that number, like they're going to be asking for almost 20, if not $20 million when you look at the rest of the receivers. And when you just look at it receptions and yards wise, which and I think this is a flawed argument when it comes to Wandale, and this is why I think he's a little bit replaceable. Receptions and yards, he's definitely top 10 in receptions over the last 2 years. I don't know where he is in yards, but this year, 10th in receptions, 10th in yards, and he got the yards per reception up. So, at least if you're looking at it from that perspective, I don't know if they're talking about yards per route run and all that kind of bullshit that I like to look at. But if they just look at that, I'm a $20 million a year player.
Yeah, I think he's going to absolutely have that case, and we'll see. Again, that's why if I'm him, I want to get to the open market because
yes,
he's going to look at me that way. You know what I mean? It might not be 32 teams don't value that. Some teams might say, this guy, you use your word, he's replaceable. Some teams are going to say, he killed us. Or, like if you're Detroit, like, hey, we could use that, whatever it may be. So he's I struggle with him because when Neighbors gets back next year, Wandale's not going to be 10th in the league in receiving and yards and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And that's fine. Like you want to have a good receiving core. It doesn't have to have if there's just one good receiver. And if Wandale has made strides this year and can be a better number 2, that's great. But what is that cost going to be? And can you get someone to give you something like that in the second round? So that's a tough one. Listen, I'm going to sit here and fence on all 3 of these because it's hard. Like I don't know what the demands are going to be. And I see the pros and cons of both sides. And so with Flott, I mean, he's the guy who plays the premium position, and it's like kind of similar to Wandale. It's for the first 3 years, you're you probably less so. At least Wandale was productive. Like Flott was kind of in and out of playing slot, playing outside, starting, not starting. And then this year he looks like a bona fide number 2 corner. Now let's not do the thing where he was good as a number 2, so let's pay him as number 1. I don't think teams are gonna do that, but he's also 24. There's a lot to like there. But again, what's that price gonna be? And if you're the Giants, you have a Debo who's kind of been okay, certainly hasn't taken any number 1 corner leap, but he's fine. You bring him back. If you don't bring Flott back, what's the plan at CB2? You're going to go sign somebody else? You're going to go make that a draft priority again? So it's he has a lot of value to them, I would think, and the known commodity and the homegrown talent, and he's a pretty good guy, never any issues. He's definitely, I think he's got some limitations. And I think you might be seeing the ceiling of what he is as a player, but at the same time, he is 24. So it's is it worth gambling that yeah, okay, this is as good as I'll ever be, but he can play like this for the next 6 years. That's a realistic outcome. So I think it's all 3 of those guys. You can make a case for and against, which I kind of just talking in circles. And I don't really have a strong conviction yet on what way I would go. You got to kind of see I haven't looked at what the tackle market looks like, what the corner market looks like. But if you're going to go pay guys, I do think there's some intrinsic value to paying your own guys. You know what you're going to get day in and day out from all 3 of those guys. They're all good character guys. They've all been mostly durable, little things here and there, but mostly durable. They can play here, whatever. I think there's value to that, but it just is going to come down to what the actual dollars and cents are. I do think Illuminor in particular is probably going to want more. I think it'll be like that Daniel Jones thing when you find out what the asking price is. I think it's going to blow some fans back. I think be prepared for him to ask for a lot of money, and then obviously we'll see if he can get it. But that's why I think these guys are going to test the market because it doesn't hurt to shoot for the stars and see if someone else can match it or at least make the Giants pay more than they would be, today. Is why I don't think there'll be any bye week coming out of the bye week, any deals because there's no reason for these guys to jump at whatever the Giants could offer right now.
Yeah. Crazy thing is, I think if you give Wandale the Khalil Shakir deal, maybe even a little bit more, I think he takes it before the season.
100%. That's the thing. That's another Joe Schoen strike that never gets talked about, being proactive. is very undervalued here. It's like you're always paying these guys retail because you're waiting, and then he had a good year. Now I got to pay him. And again, like, listen, it would take a leap of faith. They probably get criticized, but that's your job. Like, that's the whole point. My last point. I hate when people say, "Oh, that's hindsight. It's hindsight." Well, no kidding. I don't get paid $5 million a year, like to do this day in and day out. That the reason why you're getting paid to do that is you're supposed to have foresight. You're around these guys every day. You scout for a living. So if you see like Cordell Flott, like he's kind of a like do the money ball. Like, oh, this guy's kind of undervalued. He gets on base. Like, like Cordell Flott's metrics tell me he might be a guy who's on the come up here. So let's pay him $8 million a year on a 3-year deal. And he might say, shit, I've made nothing. I was, as a 3rd-round pick. Give me some guarantees. I'll jump at that. Instead, no, let's wait, have him have a good year, and now we're gonna pay, like I said, pay retail or Wandale. Like, they've liked him for a while. And again, I don't know what they valued him at, but I do know there was never any like serious negotiations. Or Jermaine Illuminor, like, did he get better this year? No, he's the same guy. Get ahead of these things. That's one of the things. Always waiting and playing everything out, and that's how you get into the 5th-year options and franchise tags. Like, be progressive. Like, look at the Eagles. They're always signing guys early. And when they first come out, like, they're paying Lander Dickerson what? And then like 2 years later, Lander Dickerson's like the best guard in the league. Or, they're paying Dallas Goedert what? And like, he's just been productive all these years. Devontae Smith, you can go on and on and on. That's the way to operate. And it's just another thing, which again, doesn't get nearly the attention of some of Joe Schoen's missteps. But I think it speaks to bring this whole conversation full circle of why he's just not very good at this job, because that's the thing that separates you. It's all right. Hey, you missed on Evan Neal. Okay, everyone would have missed on Evan Neal. Do other things that give you an advantage, that make up the gaps that you have, because everyone's going to miss in the draft. Everyone's going to make bad signings, but do other things. And there just isn't enough there for me to point to. So again, I will bring that full circle very nicely there for you, where kind of end where we started with Joe Schoen's fate.
Yeah. You mentioned the Eagles, the Giants. How many holes they have on the roster still, even though there's pieces, sure, but there's still holes. There's still lack of depth, and I think, if they traded away their 3rd-round pick for Jackson Dart this year, a team with all these holes, they're going to have a good pick. They're going to get a good player in the 1st round, but they're going to have 2 top 100 picks.
Yeah, 100%.
That's it.
When you look at the picks they've traded away, even that worked out, like Dart and Burns, but then you go through all the little trade-ups for Hyatt and Banks. I mean, when you have no line depth, no D-line depth in year 4, it's like, well, having an extra 4th-round pick, having an extra 6th-round pick, having an extra 3rd, all those add up. Darren Waller, like, so, and you haven't been stockpiling picks really either. Haven't traded back since the draft. The Leonard Williams trade was obviously the biggest trade. They pulled off the Tony trade, but really in the last 2 to 3 years, haven't really made many trades to acquire draft picks, and you're giving them out at a time you're supposed to be rebuilding again. We're just going in. All roads for me lead to the same destination here, where like Joe Schoen just hasn't done a good enough job, however you want to slice it.
All right, Dan Duggan, 4 games left, and then the real season starts. January and February, however long it takes them to fill out the staff, however long it takes them to fill out the rest of this organization, it's going to be a long month and a half, however long it takes, and then we'll take a breath. It'll be free agency. Then you'll take another breath, and then it's the draft. Then we'll take another breath, and then we'll actually have our summer. How do you like that?
Yeah.
Sound good?
Gonna be busy.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you. All right. Thank you to Dan Duggan of The Athletic for coming on again. Sean and I will be back on Friday doing a Giants-Commanders preview. And you want to know what? We may actually do a little bit of a preview, a little bit topic-based. How many times can you say that you want Joe Schoen fired over and over again? So we'll see what we have planned for the preview pod, because the Giants may actually win. If Jaden Daniels is out and Commanders looked like absolutely awful against the Vikings, the Giants may just find a way to win some games down the stretch, especially these next 3 that they have against the Commanders, the Vikings, and the Raiders. So we'll see you on Friday. Peace. Let's go Giants.
It starts today. Let's go Giants!